935 KDay, 90s hip hop back in the day. N.W.A, Yala. I love interviews like this. I have a special guest in the house. May not be that much of a in front of the camera, in front of the scenes person, but I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have seen his work and read his work, and I've followed him for a while, man, through many different avenues, from Two Dope Boys to Hip Hop DX. Were you around for Hip Hop Site?
Nah, I wasn't on there.
Okay, that's going way back. That's like late 90s. Like,
no, in that time I was working with Rap Pages, The Source, LA Times, whole bunch of other places.
So way bigger shit.
I'll let you say it, but okay.
Soren Baker in the building.
Yes, I'm here. Appreciate you having me on, though. Appreciate
Welcome
it, man.
to KDay. I'm glad to have you here. He just released this book called The History of Gangster Rap. And,
yes.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't finish all of it. I'm like 3/4 of the way through though, and
it's all good, man.
I'm glued to this thing, man. I thought I knew a lot about just the origins of rap and hip hop and gangster rap, but you put so much work into this book, and it takes so many like little side turns, and there's so many like side annotations and just information that it's crazy, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Why did you decide to write this book?
Well, my favorite rapper of all time is Schoolie D, and he's the one that created gangster rap, and I've been listening to rap since I was a little kid. I've been studying it since '85 when I first started listening to rap, and then gangster rap became, I love all forms of rap, but I think I really connected with gangster rap for a lot of different reasons. And then Schoolie D being the pioneer and creator of it, I really gravitated toward him. I'm originally from Maryland and he's from Philadelphia, so it was also, we were pretty close, only about 90 miles away. So that was also a little wrinkle, but then, you know, you have Ice-T coming out, and obviously the explosion we had with N.W.A. and Eazy-E and all the people on Ruthless and Compton's Most Wanted, DJ Quick, etc. Just all that stuff, man, it just meant a lot to me. And for writing a book, it was important for me because I think a lot of people don't give, especially gangster rap, they don't do it for rap in general, but especially in gangster rap, they don't give the artists a lot of credit or, notoriety for being great artists.
Right.
They'll want to say like, oh, this music is mindless or this music is just violent. They don't look at the deeper levels of it and the deeper meanings as to why did Schoolie D, why did, these guys write, create, produce this incredible music? How did Ice-T get the ideas to do certain things? And that's what I wanted to identify, explore, and define in the book.
Right. Now, let's just get right into it then, man, because you got so much information, and it's like, this book is so crazy. So the book starts off, I mean, Exhibit wrote a dope forward, you wrote a forward, but the book starts off pretty much with Schoolie D. Right. And I think a lot of people might find that surprising because even though gangster rap is credited as a West Coast creation, the actual first, and in many ways we did create it, but the first song, however, was created by an artist from Philadelphia, Schoolie D.
Yeah, and that's something a lot of people label or lump, I think is a good way to put it, West Coast with gangster rap, but in reality, that's not the case because Schoolie D created it. PSK is considered the first gangster rap song. PSK, he breaks it down on one way what it means in the song, but then he also stands for Parkside Killers, the gang he was in. And then also, that's one song, but he's also talking about shooting people. He's talking about taking drugs. And this is 85.
Right. So previous to Schoolie D, paint the picture for me. I mean, the first, I guess, mainstream rap song was Rapper's Delight.
Right.
And then we get Melly Mel.
With the message.
So what was hip hop like pre-Schoolie D, and why was Schoolie D kind of like looked at like, whoa, I can't believe you did that for that time frame?
Well, there are a few reasons. One, he was cussing a lot, especially for the time, which was revolutionary. He was using the N-word, which people weren't doing. And then the other thing that Schoolie did that was so different was that when Melly Mel and even Curtis Blow, and I talk about this in the book, but people like Curtis Blow and Melly Mel, they rapped about things from a reporting standpoint, or Curtis Blow with the breaks, it was like an all shucks attitude.
Right.
Melly Mel was rapping about the environment, but he was rapping about it more from a reporter standpoint and more from this is what's going on.
Yeah, and I feel like it was still kind of, it's still big boots. It was still kind of shiny back then. It was still like, and I love, actually, Whodini's one of my favorite groups of all time. But, it was still, Jerry curls and long hair and cowboy boots and a lot of leather.
And Schoolie changed it in the sense that he was the one that says, I'm the one doing it. So it became first person, and that's a huge change. And we see with 6 in the Morning with Ice-T, we see with Boys in the Hood with Eazy-E, they are now the protagonists. They're rapping in the first person. So it went from, oh, shucks, that's the breaks with Curtis Blow, and the message with It's Like a Jungle Sometimes, It Makes Me Wonder. Mm-hmm. He's talking about the stuff that's going on in the neighborhood. Schoolie D's rapping about doing the stuff in the neighborhood. And that, to me, is a huge change, and that's why, to me, I think, and Schoolie D's told me this before, that when he heard the message, it wasn't how, at least in his block in Philly on 52nd and Parkside Avenue, that's not how the dudes talked on his block, his corner, his streets, because they cussed and they used the N-word and they were rapping about having sex and all this other stuff in explicit terms like Schoolie did, and Melly Mel didn't do that. And Melly Mel also, again, was rapping about it in the third person or talking about what was going on, as opposed to Schoolie saying, I'm the one, I'm the menace. And Ice-T obviously was 6 in the Morning right after that, ratcheted that up, exponentially, and then we see it explode with Boys in the Hood.
Right. So let me just put it in perspective real quick. So we get Schoolie D first out of Philly in the early 80s. Then all of a sudden, this guy on the West Coast, Ice-T, he hears Schoolie D and he's intrigued. And
that's all in the book, man. I talked to Ice-T and had him explain, like, hearing PSK for the first time. And that was amazing, because I know Ice-T had talked about it before briefly on like Twitter and different things, but I was really fortunate to be able to talk to Ice-T for the book and really have him explain, like, the first time he heard PSK, where he was, what he thought about it, and how at the end of chapter 1.
And let me note this real quick. Sorry to cut you off, but Ice-T was rapping during the Schoolie D time. It's just Ice-T was rapping a little bit different, right? It was more party rhymes, more like disco rhymes, and
that's back to your other question about the mood and atmosphere of rap. It was much more, people have a big misconception. Rap didn't start off as this political conscious thing. It started off as party music. It was an escape, and it was about a party. It was about having fun. It was about a DJ. So it didn't have heavy political or social commentary. That came later. So when people say that about rap, it's not factually accurate. Things were about being clever, wordplay. Obviously, there was the famous battle with Kumo D and Busy B. That's like wordplay. Who's a better rapper?
Right.
That's what it was about earlier on. Like, a lot of the groups, harmonized and that type of stuff. So the political stuff didn't really come until a little bit later. And obviously, the landmark song of that was The Message. But, if you really look at songs like The Breaks, for instance, another popular song, that was super social commentary and political too. It was just done in a more friendly vibe.
More palatable way, a more digestible way, I guess, for the mainstream.
Yeah.
So Ice-T hears Schoolie D. He loves it. There's one thing in your book you talk about how Ice-T actually called Schoolie D because he took the cadence. He liked the song so much, it inspired him, he said. So he took the cadence from the Schoolie D song and asked permission, right, to put out the song 6 in the Morning?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. It was great to get all these stories in the book. So, George Hinojosa, Ice-T's manager, who also helped me get this book together, man, he basically called Schoolie. Schoolie wasn't around. And I go into much more detail in the book, and I think it's a never been told story. But, they talk about calling Schoolie, wasn't there, and then they finally talked to him, and Ice, basically is like, hey, man, I want to play my song. And it was more paying homage. And then I get Schoolie D's reaction, and he's like, look, man, if we're going to move this rap forward, we have to help each other and support each other. So I'm glad you're doing this because I want you to succeed.
That was very dope of Schoolie D, too, because a lot of rappers, would have been like, fuck that, you jacking my style.
Yeah. The Schoolie D is like, literally, he's my hero and my inspiration on so many levels in my life. He's the first dude that I was just like, this is the guy that I would want to be. Obviously, we're very different. I grew up in Maryland in a nice house and stuff, and he was in a gang in Philadelphia, and by all accounts, not a good neighborhood. And I didn't grow up like that, but a lot of his mentality and his business ideas and musically and what he was talking about and how he did things, I identified with all of that.
Right.
and I thought it was very powerful. And as his career progressed, which I also detail in the book, like he did a lot of things before anyone else. And he also gave me, because I've gotten to know him and be friends with him, he gave me a piece of art that he drew back in the 80s, because he used to draw his artwork for his singles and then even his albums. So when he was doing that, I was like, oh man, do you have any, when I interviewed him for the book, I said, hey, do you have any art that you could give me to put in the book? And he was like, oh yeah, of course, Soren. So he gave me a piece of art that's never been published and it's only available in the book. And that was like an honor. Like, this dude is my idol, my hero.
A pioneer.
And then he's like giving me artwork that's never been published before for my book. That was amazing.
Okay, so we have Schoolie D, and then we have Ice-T with 6 in the Morning.
Yep.
How do those two artists set the stage for, I guess, what would come next, which would be, I know there was things before N.W.A, but how do they set the stage for the next wave, which is pretty much N.W.A and Dr. Dre?
Right. Well, Schoolie D and Ice-T, with Rhyme Pays, the album, and then with Colors, he got much more mainstream. Schoolie D remained independent, even though he signed a Jive and was selling hundreds of thousands of units. Ice-T ended up going gold at a time when that was basically unheard of, and he's doing gangster rap, and he's cussing, and he's
not getting radio at this point, or like video or anything like that. And there's no internet. Remember that.
Yeah, there's no one's on the internet. And then at this point, the videos are really only being shown locally in New York. And, the budgets are there. MTV is not playing rap. So there's not really a lot of outlets. And Ice-T, through 6 in the Morning, through Squeeze the Trigger, through a lot of these records, and then Colors, he ends up, doing very well for himself. And all of that stuff helps set the stage for N.W.A, because Schoolie had told me this a long time ago that, basically N.W.A popularized, Hollywoodized, and put a visual on what he was doing, and even to a degree what Ice-T was doing, because Ice-T was, even though he had Rhyme Syndicate and had his proteges and stuff, Ice-T was, N.W.A obviously was a group. So they had a more visually, when you watch a video like Straight Outta Compton or Express Yourself, or even Eazy-E's videos with Easier Said Than Done, or We Want Easy, it's clear they're a crew.
Right.
And when you heard them on record, Schoolie D's by himself, Ice-T's by himself, N.W.A was a movement, and it's all these different people in the group. And so now you had MC Ren rapping, you had Eazy-E, you had Ice Cube, and then you had Dr. Dre also rapping. So now all of a sudden, and Ice Cube says, this is a gang and I'm in it.
Right.
And that changed it too, because now it was a movement. Eazy-E, like Schoolie D. One of the things I highlight about Schoolie D was he was the first rapper, period, to have his own label, Schoolie D Records. So then you have Eazy-E with Ruthless Records. So now you have, all these things that have been building for a couple years, starting with Schoolie D, who launched Schoolie D Records in '83. You have all this stuff launching and leading up, setting the stage for what Ruthless Records was going to become.
Okay, so one of the things you do in the book that I love is you have like little side notes, and you paint really, really well like what just America was like at the time. So I'm going to ask you, we're talking N.W.A, we're talking late 80s, right? 88, 89, when they first kind of hit the scene. What was going on as far as urban radio, as far as just hip hop in general? Like, what was the scene like that made it so N.W.A stood out so much?
Man, there's a lot of reasons, all of which I talk about in the book, The History of Gangster Rap. And with rap, well, first of all, there was, unlike today, a lot of people, especially from the R&B and any other genre of music outside of rap, they did not endorse, embrace, support, or like rap. So you didn't get to watch it on television, and you really didn't get to hear it on the radio, other than, of course, KDay in Los Angeles, and then specialty radio shows in New York, and then in Philadelphia. Shout out to Lady B, who gave Schoolie D, the idea to make his own records. But it's a huge difference to now. And because of that, you had, MTV only would play later, would barely play Run DMC. Michael Jackson was the first, black artist to really get a lot of airplay on MTV. So you didn't really have an outlet on video channels. You didn't really have an outlet on radio other than the couple places I mentioned, and then college mix shows and different things like that. So N.W.A. benefited in the sense of the evolution of Yo MTV Raps and the fact that now, even though it was still 1988, 1989, now we've seen Run EMC go platinum, Houdini go platinum, people like Dana Dane going gold, LL Cool J's come out and gone gold and platinum. You know, we've had Houdini. So there's been breakthroughs. Rap is still dismissed as a fad at this point, and rap is still looked at as not even music by a lot of people, including the R&B world. And that's, you know, when you go and look at it, it's very disappointing now to see, you know, the evolution of music with rock and roll and then with R&B and funk and soul and disco and all these things, to where these generations of musicians had such a hard time, especially the black ones in particular, had such a hard time breaking through. And now you have the next form of music created by predominantly by black artists who are not being embraced by black people in positions of power, whether that's with record companies, radio stations, or what have you. And so then it created this whole other underground market that rap was able to exploit. And of course, a lot of the record labels initially in particular were based in New York and were owned by white people. And then Schoolie D, you know, as a black man, started his own company, was successful. Right. And Eazy-E, of course, obviously had exponential success with Ruthless.
So once N.W.A. starts to blow up, we're approaching kind of like the early 90s, right?
Well, so 89 really broke through because of the F the Police. And then Eazy-E, Easy Does It album sold extremely well also. So they both broke through. And then they had Ruthless had the success with JJ Fad, which was another big thing that helped Ruthless out a lot. Then you have Eazy-E success, you have N.W.A. success, you have DOC, you have Michelle A. So it's this whole wave of artists that are coming out 89-ish.
Now, one of the things that always interested me, because, you know, I grew up a lot like you. Like, you're from the East Coast and you grew up having an affinity for West Coast music. I'm like the opposite, but the same thing. Like, I grew up on the West Coast and I love gangster rap. I love West Coast hip hop, of course. But I had a very big affinity for East Coast hip hop. So the Mobb Deeps and the Wu-Tangs. And
I love it all.
Yeah, so
I love it all.
My question is, when does this kind of like animosity from New York? Because I know on the West Coast, one of our biggest things, even to this day, even though we don't want to admit it sometimes, is we want the respect from the Mecca, the New York, the East Coast. When does this sort of like, I don't know, is it rivalry? Is it jealousy? Is it hating? Is it not? Explain it to me. When does it start to divide between like the East Coast and the West Coast start to emerge?
I think there are a few key points. One of the ones that I address in the book that's very significant is Willie D talks about this on Do It Like a Geo from the Ghetto Boys, in the sense that even with Rap-A-Lot based in Houston and the Ghetto Boys based in Houston, they were experiencing problems getting their songs played on the radio outside of their immediate area. New York wouldn't play them, and Willie D, in very profane terms, of course, addresses
Willie D always.
as he does. But that was, to me, a signal right away that, okay, this is different. Like, why won't New York embrace this? And then I also know with the Philadelphia artists, with Schoolie D and Steady B and different things, like Steady B, for instance, from Philadelphia. Also, once he did a serious remix with Karis One, it was the BDP remix, then he was starting to get more embraced by New York, but Steady B had a career for years at that point. So there had always been a disconnect, I think, between New York and everyone outside of New York, even New Jersey and Yonkers. You know, Yonkers is New York, and they still looked at them sideways. So this has been going on since the beginning, and I'll never forget when I was a kid, I read this article probably when I was 14 about, and it had a bunch of the iconic East Coast artists basically talking about the West Coast rap, and literally if you would have changed it, you would have thought it was like some dudes in the Klan or something. They were talking about them like they were savages and all this. And I was reading it like, are you serious? Like, you're dissing these dudes that are like making this amazing music just because they're talking about LA lifestyles opposed to talking about New York or whatever.
And that was probably a big part of it too, though. I think, you know, and this is pre-internet, so I think a lot of people from the East Coast just didn't have an idea that like, yo, man, it's sunny out here, we're smoking weed, there's palm trees, there's women, beaches, but then we have these neighborhoods that, although they might look nice and the sun looks nice, you know, you wear the wrong color. Back then especially, it could really go down, like for real, for real.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot in the book, and, you know, one of my favorite rap groups is Above the Law, and they had a great song called California, and they made a video for it. If you guys get a chance, look it up on YouTube, but it's called California, and it basically, one beat is dark and they're talking about street stuff, and then another part of the beat is brighter and they're talking about some of the more flashy and flossy stuff. And you know, that's the tricky thing, and that works in well to my life. When I first came out here, and first time I went to Compton, and I went to South Central, and I went to Carson, and I went all through these areas, I was just like, man, if I didn't know better, I would think this is, you know, these houses are around the size of my parents' house.
Yeah.
The neighborhood's around the size of my parents' yard. I would have never known. Like in Maryland, if you go to Baltimore or you go to D.C. in particular, you know when you're in a bad area very quickly. Here, it's not always the case. And
and it throws a lot of people off, man.
It threw me off because I would I would go to interview someone, or I would go there for an event or something, and I'd tell my friends what I was doing, and then
they're like, "You were where?"
Yeah, they were like,
what?
"Wait, you went at night by yourself?
You were in Compton?" You're like, "It's nice. They have horses in Compton."
Yeah, I was like, I would have never known. But then I'd see the streets. I'd be like, "Oh, Alondra. I remember Alondra.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm at Alondra." Be like,
Alondra and Rosecrans.
It's like, I've heard that somewhere.
Yeah.
Ooh, yes, I have.
All right, so now pretty much I feel like N.W.A. kind of bust the door open.
Right.
So then from N.W.A., the next major thing and I feel like this is kind of like the climax maybe would be the Death Row era, right? Even though I take that back, because I know gangster rap I feel like has like
it's
influenced
still here,
every aspect of hip hop, and it's still here, definitely.
It's still big, man.
But we go from N.W.A. You mentioned Above the Law.
Right.
Who do we get between N.W.A. and Death Row?
Well, the main breakthrough that we get, well, there's several actually, but you know, in the book, The History of Gangster Rap, I talk about the Ghetto Boys extensively because they had a huge breakthrough and huge influence of what was going on. And then you have in 1991 in particular, I talk about throughout 1991 has its own chapter in the history of gangster rap, and that's before Death Row. So, you know, that year Compton's Most Wanted had already been out, but you see Compton's Most Wanted come out again. You have Boys in the Hood soundtrack. They're obviously on there with the lead single. Then you have DJ Quick, you have Cypress Hill.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize that was all 91.
Dude, Boys in the Hood, New Jack City's also there.
Man.
The Juice soundtrack came out December 31st, I think it was, but at the end of December in 1991, the Juice soundtrack, and you have those two huge breakthrough movies with obviously Ice-T starring in New Jack City. Ice-T's OG Original Gangster album came out that year. So there are all these records that came out. N.W.A.'s Ziggin' for Life came out. Ice Cube Death Certificate came out in 91. 91 is like a crazy year for rap. So you especially gangster rap, and you have all these records coming out, and you have gangster rap also dominating the box office. And, you know, Colors had come out before, but I think with New Jack City and then Boys in the Hood obviously being set in Los Angeles, you're getting to see it again, and now more from the street perspective, whereas Colors was, you know, from the cops perspective, which obviously didn't resonate with the rap community nearly as much. But with New Jack City and then Boys in the Hood, you have these things that have never been seen before. And that really sets up the commercial explosion that we see with Death Row, with the Chronic. But what the Chronic also did that Above the Law, like in my opinion, really started, and I go into detail with that in the book, The History of Gangster Rap, is that Above the Law started slowing down the music and using the funk samples that Dre, EPMD, X-Clan, even MC Breed and others had used. And Del the Funky Homo Sapien on the I Wish My Brother George Was Here, Ice Cube solo records, all these records had used them, but not in the way that Above the Law and then Dr. Dre used it. And when they did it, it totally changed rap, because what you had that had never been done before was gangster rap before that and Yuckmouth gave me a great quote about this in the History of Gangster Rap. The N.W.A, basically, their music was much more in line with like Public Enemy. The sonics of it was very aggressive, very fast, and very confrontational.
Right.
With the Chronic, especially on the singles in particular, it's much more mellow, laid back, slowed down. So, and Chuck D talks about it going from the crack era to the weed era.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see that and you understand that a lot of people were and remain turned off by the name gangster rap and the content of the music and the sound of it and the attitude of it. But when you see and hear Snoop rapping or Dr. Dre rapping and they sound friendly almost and they're laid back, they're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
They're super violent, super, if you want to call it misogynistic, super everything that gangster rap had been before that, but they were doing it over what would be considered more friendly sounding beats.
Were honestly making gangster pop songs, if you want to keep it real. Like, and I mean, the songs were so good, you couldn't deny them whether you're a hip hop head or just a casual listener, but.
Yeah. I mean, I put it in there like Rolling Stone and all these other places that had basically disregarded, dissed, and belittled rap. Now all of a sudden with the Chronic, now all of a sudden it's great music and it's like astonishing and all these other things. And that's 1992. The first rap records came out in 1979. That's a huge gap. And it had sold millions of albums at that point. So it wasn't for lack of sales. And then clearly it wasn't for lack of creativity or lack of variety or lack of style or anything, because we had, in my opinion, 88 is the best year in rap. And in that year in particular, you have this explosion of sound styles, artists from different regions. And, you know, to wait till 1992, you know, almost 15 years after the music existed on record to finally start embracing it is, you know, ridiculous.
Right. The History of Gangster Rap in stores now. Soren Baker is my guest, man.
Yeah.
Man, this book is really good. So the Chronic comes out, and at that point, the whole industry's on notice. Like, this is the next wave in hip hop.
Right.
Definitely. So then we get Snoop. Snoop has his own chapter in the book. What was the Snoop wave like? Like, when Snoop was going to come out, did just everything stop? I remember like people lining up at midnight to buy the album. Like, and I was relatively a young kid back then, but I still just remember like it coming out of every car. It was just everything.
Yeah, I mean, Snoop, the Doggy Style record is phenomenal on so many levels and layers, and it's similar to the Chronic in the sense that you have this, and like, you know, we saw with Ruthless, this wave of artists that are being showcased with the Death Row Inmates, as they were known back in the day.
Yep.
But, you know, you see the RBXs, the Dazzes, the Corrupt, the Lady of Rages. And the thing is, that's in addition to Snoop and Dre, and Snoop in particular, who's dominating and destroying the album. And Nate Dogg, of course, even though he's featured much more prominently later in his career than on those two records, Doggy Style and The Chronic. But the thing is that when you have that type of brilliant production, you have the brilliant work of multiple artists, the DOCs helping with writing and creative stuff, you know, the skits. I do a sidebar in the book called Holy Skit, where I have, you know, Snoop talk about the skits and why they did them the way they did them. I talked to the DOC for the History of Gangster Rap about how it's funky enough, and how that song with 1, and then it comes to 2 to the 3 and 4 patterns, you know, Snoop's is 1, and it comes to 2 to the 3 and 4. So it's like I have all these things that set the stage to have Snoop just be this like icon. And then, you know, I tie it into the book because it is important, but Snoop also was on trial for murder at the time.
Right.
And that played a huge role in it too, because Snoop made history for 2 reasons. Doggy Style was the first album ever released where the debut album from an artist entered the Billboard charts at #1. That had never been done before.
I didn't even know that.
That had never been done before. And Snoop, unfortunately, was also the first artist to be on trial for murder and have the #1 album.
I didn't know that.
So it's, you know, he became, as I put in the book, The History of Gangster Rap, famous and infamous basically all at once. I mean, Newsweek had him on the cover, when is rap too violent, or is rap too violent? So Newsweek, which is a mainstream news publication that later and continuously evolved more into a popular culture magazine than a straight up news magazine. They were even covering Snoop Dogg and his album.
Yeah, I think if you're younger today and you just see, because if you're young, you just see Uncle Snoop.
Yeah.
You don't really remember Crippin' Snoop, Crippin' ass Snoop, right? And this is around the time where there was a lot of pastors burning CDs. I remember one time they were steamrolling, the Death Row CDs and stuff. So you got to keep in mind, Snoop is like, this gangster rap thing, Snoop being the head of it in this point in time, this was a big deal. This shocked people. This was like, they've never seen or heard these stories or words before.
And this is some I should have included earlier in our discussion, but you also have, the Rodney King incident.
Oh, very big deal and very instrumental.
Because that happened in 91, and then that gave a level of validation to what the Schoolie D's, the Ice-T's, the Boogie Down Productions, the N.W.A's, the Eazy-E's, the Cypress Hills, that everybody had been talking about. The Compton's Most Wanted. They had a song called One Time Gaffled 'Em Up. That was their first big single. And that's the thing, like rap.
Willie D had a song called Fuck Rodney King.
Well,
that's one of my favorites.
That's a whole other story.
In his ass.
But
when I see him, I'm a blast.
Yeah. Willie D, man, that guy. But the thing is that, rap always is the voice of the streets and remains that way.
Right.
And it's always ahead of the curve talking about what's really happening in America, especially serving as the voice to the voiceless. And gangster rap within rap is the one that does it better than anyone else, because these are the, there's different strata of rap like you talked about. In New York, gangster rap's always been dismissed and always been looked down upon. So you have the disenfranchised among the voice of the voiceless. Mm-hmm. So this is like, I put it in the book, The History of Gangster Rap. A lot of these artists are kind of viewed as the second-class citizens among the second-class citizens. So it's extra layers of things that go into it, which makes their success so phenomenal and so noteworthy, which is why one of the main reasons I wanted to write The History of Gangster Rap is to show like these dudes, even within the rap world, stood against all these obstacles and then became the biggest people, not only in rap, but in period entertainment, which is astounding.
Now, we're fully in the Death Row era. Death Row is like, to put it lightly, is the biggest shit in hip hop.
Yeah. By far.
It's coming out, I know growing up on the West Coast anyway, it's coming out of every car.
Right.
It's everywhere. It's the sound. It's like the equivalent to, like, I guess what you would say like Drake and the Migos are now.
Okay.
That was Death Row. Where did we go wrong with Death Row? Like, I feel like Death Row had the best music. I know where we went wrong, but what happened with Death Row? Because it was this big movement. They were making a whole bunch of money. They were feeding a lot of people. And then all of a sudden it's just like, we lose Pac, we lose Biggie, party over. And I feel like in a lot of ways when they died, and obviously gangster rap's not dead because it's influenced, every rapper I feel like that's out. Right. But I feel like from how it was, I feel like that killed it. The industry was just like, yo, this gangster rap, this shit is real. We don't want to be involved in this shiny suit era, Yeah,
well, that ties well into my book, The History of Gangster Rap. I talk about that because that, with those deaths happening 96 and 97 respectively, then not coincidentally, in my opinion, and documented by, in the book, we see the explosion of Master P in particular with danceable gangster rap. Mm-hmm. So he's rapping about being a soldier and rapping about his army and his crew and No Limit. And these guys are basically, obviously relocated up to Northern California, but they're rapping about, drug dealing, gang banging and killing people and all the stuff that gangster rappers talk about. But they're, unlike what Dre and Death Row did, was slowing it down and making it sound familiar and friendly. What No Limit did was they sped it back up to make it dance music, but they made it danceable.
Right.
N.W.A was more like Public Enemy and Schoolie D. These songs were not songs that the average person wanted to dance to. No Limit, however, made stuff that people felt good to listen to because it sounded good and it felt good. So now you could listen to somebody rapping about, stuff in the hood, but they be doing it fast. And now you can listen to it in a club. And the South, like the West Coast, had been overlooked for so long, obviously with 8-Ball and MJGs of the world and the Outcasts of the world and the Goody Mobs, it started breaking through after the initial success of the Ghetto Boys and the Two Live Crews and MC Shy D's. But way after that, you know, we got the next huge breakthrough with Master P, and with him, you know, he was, you know, he modeled, if you look on, I think it was 99 Ways to Die, he dedicated it to Eazy-E. So, I mean, he was trying to be Eazy-E, and, you know, we see that success with him putting out a gazillion records and then going gold and platinum.
Some of the dopest album covers of all time.
And I have a big spread of that in my
in the book.
The History
And that's one of the things I love about the book, because it tells the story, but as it's telling the story, like, it goes into things like the Master P album covers, or like the significance of the Ghetto Boys. I think there's even like a chapter on like a little side note on Murs and like Delicious Vinyl to kind of give you the
with Delicious Vinyl, I talked about how during the explosion of gangster rap with the Ice-T's and the N.W.A's from LA, Delicious Vinyl they were basically the foil to that. They had the Tone Locs and the Young MCs, so they were releasing like the commercial-minded rap music from Los Angeles. And then with Murs, the reason I wanted to talk to him...
One of my favorites, by the way, man.
Yeah, Murs is phenomenal.
Murs, yeah.
And Murs bought a copy of the book, so thank you for that, Murs.
Hey, what up, Murs?
Yeah,
Murs actually produced a song for him, too, so...
Even better.
What up, Murs?
Full circle moment, as Dana Dane would say. But the thing about Murs, and I wanted to talk to a couple people, and I got Murs to talk about it in particular, was the atmosphere of being from Los Angeles and not being a gangster rapper and trying to be successful. Because I knew that the Jurassic 5s, the Project Blodes, the Freestyle Fellowships... the dilated peoples of the world, the Defarais, the Alcoholics, the King T's even, like, it was hard for them to break through to a degree, not because of their music, not because they weren't talented, but because the perception, which is not reality, but the perception was that if you're from the West Coast, you gotta be a gangster.
Yeah, and you know, that's one of the things I hated in that time, because I remember, like, I was always a fan of both. Like, I liked what Dr. Dre was doing with Aftermath, but I love Dilated and Defari and what we were doing on the underground out here. And it was a shame, in my opinion, that the two worlds
work the angles,
never
man.
Like, exactly, pun intended.
Yes.
But it was a shame that like the two worlds never connected and linked up and did something even bigger, man, because they're Planet Asia.
Well, we see the best marriage of that with Exhibit. And Exhibit... he did the forward for me in the book, and Exhibit's a friend of mine, and I'm blessed to be one of those with him. But, you know, Exhibit was the guy that really blended the quote-unquote backpack / rapidy rap world with the gangster rap world, and he did it at the highest level and still does to this day. He's got I talked to Exhibit actually this morning, and he's got a project, The Serial Killers, with Be Real from Cypress Hill and Demrick, coming out on Halloween.
Okay. So, Keep an ear out for that.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
We got to get X up here, man.
Yeah.
Like, at the speed of life.
Dude. 40 Days, 40 Nights, Restless. His whole catalog, like, Man vs. Machine.
Yeah, man.
Come on, dude.
Y'all need to stop sleeping on
Napalm.
X. Averex to the Z. X-A-Lotta. X marks the spot. Nah, Trick. X marks the marks, or whatever Snoop says. But
spot.
All right, with a couple more things I want to hit on you. Hit with you real quick. I've been hanging out with Mars too much. There's a chapter in the book where you talk about the Bay Area exclusively. And I think that's important, because I think a lot of times people from outside of California just assume that West Coast hip hop is just LA, but Northern California, Oakland, San Francisco, even like Sacramento, Stockton, that area, it's Cali, and we love Cali, but it's so different. And but they were still on their gangster shit too, but in the Northern California way.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's why it was important for me to put that in there, because Spice One had 3 gold records. You know, Spice One was selling 500,000, 750,000, and he was on the Menace to Society's soundtrack, and he was as gangster as it gets musically. And, you know, he was affiliated with Too Short, of course, and he was on Jive Records. But then I did another sidebar about Sacramento, because you have X-Rated.
I was getting ready to bring that up right now, man. Yes.
Let
me cut you off for 1 second. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
The reason I love this section in the book when you bring up the Sacramento artists, like the X-Rateds, the Sebos, all that, is because I grew up in Northern California. So I actually moved to Southern California as a teenager, but I grew up in San Francisco, Stockton, and out there, a lot of the artists like the Sebos and X-Rated, they were just as big as the mainstream artists. Like, that's how high of reverence they're held out there. They're legends out there, and I'm glad you highlighted that.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Thank you. But it's important because it's the history of gangster rap. So, you know, granted, I was limited by pages and that type of stuff, but I tried to, you know, do a great job including as many people as possible. And even the ones I didn't mention as much, I still tried to include them to show why they were important.
Right.
Because so many artists created and contributed stuff to gangster rap and to rap in general. And the people from Sacramento did. And the X-Rated, Desibo, and Brother Lynch, you know, they all rap about being Crips. So, you know, that's as gangster as it gets. And, you know, Spice One is gangster rap. And, you know, I also broke down, even though I think he is more and not quite a gangster rapper, I talk a lot about E40 because E40 set the stage for what you're talking about, the Northern Cali, because obviously Too Short precedes him, and Too Short wasn't a gangster rapper either, but Too Short...
There was still that lifestyle,
yeah,
like, definitely.
Too Short talked about the same world, but from a different perspective.
Because one thing people from out of California have to realize, too, is Northern California wasn't Crips and Bloods.
Right.
And another thing in Northern California was there is a heavy... as opposed to Southern California, where it might have been more gangbanging, Northern California was more pimping and spitting game and cuff your bitch, man, you know?
Too Short, man. Too Short. Feel more slim.
Okay, so the last thing I wanted to hit on with you, man, is because at the time, especially in the death row era, there was a lot, you know, and I like how you put it in the book, how you said it's kind of like the so-called East Coast versus West Coast rivalry, because we know a lot of that was made by the media.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there was people from the East Coast kind of like criticizing us for,
absolutely,
you know, the way we rapped and the things we said and gangsterism and putting these things out. But then something funny happens. The whole country, East Coast, West Coast, down South, Midwest, they all take a lot of the gangster and they put it in their artist. And then after the death row era, we get the we get the Shiny Suit era. That was really happy and shiny. But we needed that because two of the most biggest rappers in hip-hop had just died. But then immediately following the Shiny Suit era, we get DMX.
Right.
And like DMX, granted, he's from New York. He had the New York delivery, the New York beats. But he's gangster in the sense that
he's super
Schoolie D was gangster, you know? He wasn't a Crip or Blood, but he was robbing, stealing.
I mean, that's the thing. Every gangster rap is, in my opinion, you know, the most influential subgenre because the political nature of gangster rap remains today. And I think the best example of that is Vince Staples. He does that in a lot of his music and has done it throughout his career. And the thing is, we're seeing the fact that gangster rap is alive and well, whether it's looking at the way people dress, the way they talk, the way they act, the tattoo culture, all these different things, wearing bandanas. This is all like gangster stuff. And it's, you know, granted Schoolie D started it and all that, but it gained its popularity and its real momentum here on the West Coast. Right.
Even like slang, like, what's up, cuz? Or like, we joke in the halls all the time. Like, what are you doing right now? Just bicking it, you know? But that's all heavily gang influenced, you know?
Yeah. It is.
So, and then of course we get the DMXs, and you know, Aftermath has another iconic run in the late 90s, early 2000s. 50 Cent, who I consider to be pretty gangster, you know.
Yeah, I did a chapter focusing on him, 50 Cent in the game, because, you know, 50 Cent obviously with What Up Gangster, he's not from out here, but he's shouting out Bloods and Crips, yeah. And then obviously Game being his protege, so that's hugely important because, and I'd have people talk about this in my book, The History of Gangster Rap, but the labels stopped signing, especially artists from the West Coast, but they stopped signing gangster rappers for a couple years. And that's why we saw that lull after Biggie and Pac died of gangster rappers from the West Coast being successful. You know, we had Mac 10, we had the East Siders, and we had Exhibit, but they had all kind of been out before those guys were killed, or they had been, not kind of. They were all out before, but they became more popular after. But it wasn't really until the Game.
Right. Like 2004, 2005-ish.
Well, 50 Cent, and then, but when the Game did on the West Coast is when that resurrected.
Oh, yeah, he brought us back, man.
Yeah.
Because it was dry out here for a while.
Yeah,
but we needed to find our way, you know, so.
Yeah.
Shout out Chuck.
Yeah, and then, you know, we saw tied into that, and I think part of that, of course, was with the Chronic 2001. You know, that helped resurrect it, but again, that wasn't a set of new artists other than the 6'2" dude, but he was from Texas with DOC.
Right.
So, you know, it didn't click into a real new wave until 50 Cent and Game, and then we start seeing all the guys we listen to now even.
Right.
So
the TDs of the world, the YGs of the world.
Exactly.
Nipsey.
Yep.
Well, hey, man, the book, The History of Gangster Rap,
Yes.
in stores now. By the time this interview comes out, it'll be in stores now.
Oh, it's in stores already, man.
Oh, came out yesterday, huh?
Yeah,
That's my bad.
It's out.
I'm a shitty interviewer because I should know that.
It's out.
Came out yesterday. The book signings is Friday.
Yeah, at the Grove, Barnes & Noble. Please come through from 7 to 9 p.m. The Barnes & Noble in Grove, I'm going to do a little talk. I have a special guest or two with me, and then I'm going to sign the books and do a little meet and greet.
Nice.
So, yeah, man, Barnes & Noble, The Grove, 7 to 9.
I live pretty close to the Grove, too, so I'm going to try to make it through.
October 5th, baby.
Yeah.
Friday night. Friday night.
Hey, Soren Baker in the building. I could have talked to you for another hour right now, man.
I appreciate it, man.
This is
a beautiful thing,
This
man.
book is crazy, man. Anyway, thank you. You always got a home here on KDay. I feel like your book was handmade for the format of music we play, so thank you for coming through, man.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
It's 935 KDay.